Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hoff, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers.
Hello. Today I have with me Trishia Plett. Tricia is the mother of one, and she works from home as an ambassador with a health and wellness company. She's also a certified mindset and life coach. Tricia is here today to tell her birth story and to talk about how she has managed motherhood and career. Tricia, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Hey, Kelly, it's so good to be here.
It's so good to see you again, and I am so excited because when I met you, you were working on this whole motherhood, balance, all of that stuff. And I'm so excited to hear your birth story finally. And then we're going to talk about how you have managed this huge transition over the past year.
Well, I'm excited to share my birth story because I love birth. Take it from a girl who actually hated talking about birth when she was younger, and her oldest sister was into midwifery and her best friend was into midwifery. And I would be like, girls, can you just shut up? And now I'm like, I get it.
It's funny how we change our preferences over time.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how you decided to have kids, all about your pregnancy, all that fun stuff.
So we thought we wouldn't be able to have kids, actually. And when we were dating, I told my then boyfriend, now husband, I'm like, you know what, if you want to have kids, we should probably break up. He was not going to break up with me over that. He said he loved me for me. So that was, obviously, he was the one then. And a few months later, I was diagnosed with PCOS, which confirmed why my menstrual cycle was totally whacked. And so I just kind of set up my mind that I'm not going to have kids. And I went on birth control. And, you know, just because if there was the chance of getting pregnant, we didn't want to have a baby too soon in our relationship. And I got off of birth control out of necessity. I didn't want to go off of it. I loved it. It gave me energy and put me in a good mood all the time. But I got a pulmonary embolism. And so I had no choice but to go off of birth control. So that opened up the possibility of pregnancy, but we were also strongly advised to never get pregnant. We got pregnant 6 months later without any complications. Now, I had consulted with my family doctor about it, and she had confirmed that my blood work was fine and I was safe to get pregnant. And we got pregnant without trying. So that was sort of terrifying and also awesome because I was still afraid of the process of birth. And so I was like, I'll never be ready to get pregnant. And my husband wanted to start having kids because I'm 30 now. And he's like, we need to start. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if I want to. And like, it costs so much money. And I don't want anything passing through my vagina. That's awful. And we got pregnant. And I wasn't checking my cycle like I should have been. And I remember very clearly checking my app. And I went to my husband and I said, oh shit, we're probably pregnant. And I dared not pee on a stick for like 3 weeks. And I got a massage, and the massage therapist, she's like, is there anything going on with your hormones? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I might be pregnant. She's like, you might be pregnant and you don't know. I'm like, yeah, I just don't feel like taking a test. And she's like, you need to take a test because something is going on. So I took a test the next day and I was indeed pregnant. So that was kind of exciting and also totally terrifying.
So then how was your pregnancy?
Pregnancy started out easy. Actually, the whole pregnancy was overall like easy, except it wasn't because I had complications. But, you know, like my body just did its thing and I was relaxed about it. In the whole 9 months of being pregnant, maybe spent 30 seconds being afraid of birth.
That's a change.
Yeah, it's like, what happened to me? I'm like, I think it's because I got in tune with my body. I'm like, okay, I'm pregnant. This is not the first time somebody got pregnant. And people have been doing this for forever. So I can do it too.
Right. Did you have to do anything about the pulmonary embolism? Did you have to be on any medications, or were they just, you were cleared because of your blood work?
Well, so that's a good question because I wasn't aware that if I ever got pregnant, I needed to be on thinners. Mm-hmm. So I actually did have to go onto blood thinners, but I didn't find out until a few months in. So in the first part of pregnancy, I had some spotting, which it was terrifying. I had to get some ultrasounds done. That was sort of dramatic in itself. So I was going to have a midwife, and I wanted to have a midwife that I could pay through insurance because, that would save me $6,000. And so I found a nurse midwife at a hospital, not the one I usually go to, but a different one. And it was like equal distance. So I'm like, that works. So I set up an appointment to meet with this midwife. Then I had the spotting, and then I had to go for an ultrasound. And my family doctor practices out of the hospital that the nurse midwife was at. And so she set up an ultrasound for me at that hospital. I almost got kicked out of the hospital by security. That was during all of the very tight mask regulations. And I was like stressed out because I'm like, I'm having a miscarriage. And then they had the regulation of wearing the N95 masks. I was okay with like the surgical mask, but the N95, I started to like hyperventilate. And so I was like, I can't do this. And so I took the mask off, and security's like, you're going to have to leave. So that was terrifying. I'm like, I'm never going back to this hospital because I cannot have that experience every time I go in for an appointment, because that's going to probably make my blood pressure higher and just like everything's going to be bad. And even if I can be prepared for it, like I still have that trauma response to walking in those doors. And I'm like, I can't go to that hospital for delivering my baby. So I was on the hunt for finding a new midwife, because at this point, I still didn't know about being on blood thinners. Everything checked out, but there was a little bit of I never fully understood what was going on. It's kind of like a blood sac or something. And they're like, either it clears up or it doesn't. Either the baby doesn't develop properly or it does. Like, there's really nothing we can do about it. It's probably okay. Just don't have sex. So
was it a subchorionic bleed? Is that what they called it? Do you remember?
It was a big word. Like. It was a really big word. It maybe was that.
Just like a little blood pool in your placenta that sometimes.
Yeah, I think something like that. Like I was also so stressed out about the whole mask thing. I actually did get into the hospital without the N95 because triage told security to back off.
Good. Because that's not evidence-based. That whole N95, you should be fit tested for an N95. So to make everybody wear an N95 regardless of their medical status is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
in my opinion.
That's what all my friends told me who work. Like I have a friend who was a CNA during that whole time, and they were fitted every week for a new N95. And she's like, why were they making you wear one? I'm like, that's just the regulation at that hospital. Yeah, triage really stood up for me. My husband pretty much had to stand between me and security and just basically tell him, listen, she's having a panic attack right now, and I need you to back off.
Yeah.
It was awful. I'm like, I can't go there. Yeah. And I knew that the other hospital, the one that I have been to before, like when I went for my pulmonary embolism, they did the surgical mask. And I've usually been comfortable in those. And I'm like, well, obviously that is my hospital of choice going forward. Yeah.
That's frustrating that that's how you had to choose.
Yeah, but I'm glad it happened in the beginning, honestly, like rather than, and I'm glad that my husband was with me rather than me going in by myself.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what I would have done. I would have left.
Yeah. So then at that was at the appointment where they found the subchorionic hemorrhage?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And then you didn't go back to that hospital after that, or did you go a couple times?
No, I never went back to that hospital. I decided to go private with a midwife. So I called a bunch of midwife practices, like nobody called me back. And then there was this random doula who called me back. And she's like, yeah, so we don't really do insurance, but we would love to meet with you and just talk about what your goals are and talk about birth. And we just chatted on the phone for a while, and I just pulled into work and we talked for 20 minutes. I'm like, this lady is awesome. I mean, they don't take my insurance, but I'm going to go check these people out. So I confirmed with my husband if it was okay. We talked about the price, and I set up an appointment to meet with a midwife. And I met with a midwife, and we left the appointment, and my husband's like, that didn't even feel like an appointment. I said, exactly. That's why you go to the midwife, because she does all of the things, but you feel like you're at home. And I'm just was so much peace about it. I'm like, I'm so glad this worked out this way. Like, it sucks that other thing didn't work, but this is going to be so amazing and so relaxing and so much peace around being pregnant. And my husband was looking forward to it, which is interesting because I had actually wanted a home birth, and I had been telling him for years that I was going to have a home birth. And he's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, oh, yes, I will. Because all of these things, and I started listing them off, and he finally was on board with it. So he's like, yes, of course you can have a midwife, but we're going to do a home birth and all the things. I don't remember the timeline exactly, but I only had that one appointment with that midwife. And a few weeks later, I was working at home, baking cookies, actually. on a Sunday afternoon. And I said to my husband, my left arm isn't really feeling great. And it's kind of warm in my bicep. And I'm not sure if I should be concerned about it or if it's nothing. So we talked about whether or not we should go to the hospital. And I'm like, it's not too bad. I'll think about it. And I just had this unsettled feeling in my gut. And so I'm like, as soon as I'm done making cookies, and I was almost done, I'm like, let's go to the hospital. Because I'm like, I have to finish what I'm doing, because if it is what I think it is, I'm staying there for the night. So we went into the hospital, and when you go to the ER and you have a blood clot history, and then you tell them that you're having symptoms of blood clots, they get you through pretty fast, at least here.
Yeah, I do.
And so I don't take it lightly. I don't take it lightly. My husband's like, just tell them you're having chest pains. I'm like, no, I'm not having chest pains. I just have discomfort in my bicep. So they triaged me super fast, and they found a clot in my left bicep and in my right subclavian. And so I immediately was put on Levinox injections. And somebody asked me, didn't you know that you needed to be on these when you're pregnant because of your blood clot history? And I'm like, no, they didn't tell me. So I had, a few months of bliss and no needles. And then I had injections twice a day, every 12 hours for the rest of the pregnancy and 6 weeks after. I am terrified of needles. So I never gave myself one injection. My husband did them all, or one of my friends.
That's good that you had somebody to do it for you.
My husband, one time, he decided to do a really ridiculous thing and do one while driving. It all worked out, I promise.
We got nothing going on. Let's just give you a shot while I'm driving.
Yeah, so I pinched my skin and he shoved in the needle and did the thing.
Stabbed you?
Yeah. It was all fine and good, but I'm like, I'm never doing that again.
Don't try this at home.
Don't do it. It was terrifying for me to feel my skin pop. And I'm like, nope, never doing that again. It also meant that, I couldn't go away without him. And he always had to be home in the morning and in the evening to do the shots. And
so then were you able to continue with that midwife?
No.
Given the risks? Okay. So then what happened after?
So I was in the hospital, I think, for 3 nights for observation to make sure that my shots were the right dose and stuff. And I met some of the local OBGYN doctors. And seriously, everything just crumbled and fell down, and all of my dreams for pregnancy just crashed. And they told me, you have to find a doctor. You can't have a midwife. You're going to have a hospital birth. And I think they even told me I'd probably have to get induced. They just loaded me up on all the bad stories. And I mean, I think they were just doing their job. I know they were just doing their job, but it wasn't delivered very well. And I'm like, how do I find a doctor? And they're like, you need a doctor right now. I can't believe you don't have one. I'm like, duh, because I have a midwife. That's why I don't have a doctor. I met one of the high-risk OBGYN doctors from here, and he was the one who actually presented all of the things. So he didn't start off on a good foot for me. And something just felt kind of off about him. I found out after I had the baby that he actually has the highest cesarean rates here. So, I wasn't going for cesarean. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why we weren't quite getting along, because our vision for birth would have been different. I was very relieved to find one more doctor that was qualified to take me on. There was only the two.
So you needed a high-risk OB, or did you also go to maternal fetal medicine?
I went to maternal fetal medicine, and I had a high-risk OB.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, I had.
So then it was the high risk OB that had the high cesarean rate that you decided to not go with.
Yes.
So then how was it with the one that you chose?
It was really good. So you know how the system works? There's 6 or 10 doctors who work in the same practice. You hire one doctor, but you see them never. So that was happening, and I was struggling with it really bad, especially because I have to say, I was really angry about being on blood thinners and about the change of plans. There was months of just simmering anger. I wasn't always aware of it, but it was definitely there, and I'm glad that I dealt with it before birth. But anyways, back to the doctor. So I hired a doctor. I was recommended to her. I'm not really sure how I decided that she was my doctor, but I met with her one time, and she said that because a local birthing center closed down, a lot of those clients are coming to this practice. And she said, we try to do the best care we possibly can. Since you wanted a midwife, we know that you probably wanted the most natural approach to birth and labor. And so we're going to respect that. And we just had that open conversation. It was really good. But also one time I had a conversation with her, and I said, I'm not really liking my appointments. I said, I'm coming in here and I'm always seeing somebody different and they don't even know my case. It's like they're not reading my file.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just really had a really open conversation about that and really established a mutual respect between us. She told me some of her experiences with birthing, and she said, if at all possible, I want you to be able to have a vaginal birth. She says, if I think that you need a C-section, it's going to be because you actually really do need one. I am not going to recommend one just because I want to go home and have supper.
Right.
And I'm sure that, like, honestly, there's probably way more doctors out there like that. But I needed to have that conversation because I was having an ultrasound every month at the maternal fetal medicine, which was a completely different practice. And then I was having my OB appointments. And at the end of pregnancy, I was having 3 appointments a week. And I just needed to know what I was allowed to do and what, you know, like which things could I say no to? And would my doctor respect that?
Yeah. That's important.
Yeah. And
I
like
think everybody needs to know that.
Prenatal classes were really helpful in educating me and knowing, you know, what was potentially going to come for me, what a hospital birth could look like, what it looks like when you're considered high risk in a hospital birth. And I also hired a doula who actually taught the prenatal classes. And she was just really open and honest. And she said, you know, Tricia, this is probably what it's going to look like. You're probably going to have to get Pitocin at some point because they will want you to deliver your placenta within 30 minutes of delivering the baby. And so you're probably going to have to get Pitocin. You're going to have to be monitored 24/7. You can probably have a wireless monitor, but you're going to have to be monitored. And I'm like, I just don't want an IV line. And she's like, you're going to have an IV line. You might not be hooked up, but you're going to have an IV line in place just in case something goes wrong. And I'm like, how am I going to do labor with an IV in place? I was just dreading it. Like I had all these horror stories in my mind about it.
But she was explaining the way that birth was going to go down.
Yes. And I really needed that. And it was actually at a prenatal class where I realized that I had a lot of anger about my hospital birth coming up. I'm not sure what was said, and I made this under my breath comment, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I am so angry. And now everybody knows.
I love that you're aware of that, because part of the reason that I'm doing this podcast and then I'm birth coaching is because that is pretty common, because birth isn't straightforward all the time, especially if there's medical complications. And it is so easy to begin to feel out of control and to have anger and resentment because of that. And so I really want to help moms focus on how to, I don't want to say regain control, because what do we really have control over in life? But to regain autonomy and continuing to be a part of the decision-making process, even though things aren't going the exact way that you pictured. Because it's not like if you go in for a routine procedure, if you're going to get out your tonsils, it's pretty straightforward. They can tell you exactly how it's going to go. With labor and delivery, we really have no idea. There are so many things that could happen. And it is really easy to feel out of control. And the overarching feeling that I get from moms is anger and resentment. And it's really hard to work through that. And I'm really glad that you had the opportunity to work through that before your delivery, because otherwise I feel like that's what leads to trauma.
Yeah. I've thought about that too. I'm like, this is like totally the end of the story, but like I have to say it. My doctor told me at my 6 weeks appointment, she said, your birth was the most peaceful birth I ever attended. I just know that is like a testimony to dealing with my anger and my resentment before that.
Yeah, you were able to grieve the birth that you wanted.
Yeah.
And move forward with the birth that you were presented.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Are you pregnant and planning a hospital birth? You don't need a birth plan. You need a birth vision. In my opinion, birth plans set you up for failure. Yep, I said it. Hear me out before you turn off this podcast. You may think that by downloading a generic birth plan, it means you're in control. The truth is, it's not that simple. No one can control exactly how their birth will go. There are way too many variables. What every pregnant person wants is to walk into the hospital pregnant and to walk out with a healthy newborn in their arms. The journey in between is the murky part. It's hard to know what issues might come up that need to be addressed. If you focus your energy on a birth vision rather than giving your power to a birth plan, you can empower yourself to make the best choices for you and your baby.
That's why you need to get into my Empowered Hospital Birth program. As a labor nurse and mindset coach, I can help guide you through the process of maintaining the calm autonomy that will help you achieve the birth vision you desire. In my Empowered Hospital Birth program, I will help you identify the source of anxiety you have surrounding hospital birth, fill in knowledge gaps to make sure that you are fully informed and confident, learn key phrases so you can better communicate with your medical team, emotionally process your fears so that they don't hold power over you. Go to kellyhoff.com/empowered to book a free 30-minute private birth vision call, where we will identify your top fears and must-haves and gain clarity on exactly how you want to feel in the birth space. That's KELLYHOF.com/empowered. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey.
It's the most empowering thing because once I finally dealt with it, so I had to visit the hospital a lot of times. So one of the times I went to the hospital, I actually had a 3-hour nosebleed. That was terrifying. And, they couldn't do anything to stop the nosebleed because I was on blood thinners. And that was early in pregnancy. And I would tell myself when I went to the hospital, this is a safe space. That is what I told myself, like anytime that I had to go to the hospital or have a doctor's appointment, like this is a safe space. These people care about me. They have my best interest in mind. And I just did that on repeat. This is a safe space. This is a safe space.
And if you don't feel safe with someone, you're entitled to speak up.
Yes. Honestly, the OB doctor who told me, you're high risk and it's going to be awful, who has the high cesarean rates, I didn't feel safe with him. And there was actually a different OB that I saw. Funny story. So I'm going to be all over the place, okay? But I'm just going to say this.
That's okay.
Towards the end of pregnancy, I had my last ultrasound with the maternal fetal medicine. And they said, well, everything is textbook perfect. It's beautiful. Like everything is amazing. I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life, whatever. And she says, okay, we're going to schedule you for an induction. And I said, I'm not getting induced unless if there's a medical emergency. And she kind of rolled her eyes at me and she says, well, I guess I'll make a note about that, but you do need to get induced. So I had a conversation with my doctor and she's like, no, you don't. If everything is fine, I support you to not be induced. I said, in the event that I have to be induced, I will not be induced before like August 23rd or something, because my mom had a baby on the 21st of August, the year her mom passed away, and her mom's birthday was the 23rd of August. And I just thought, you know what? I'm due close to the same time. So if I have to be induced, let's see if we can hit birth on the 23rd, just for the sake of,
right.
If we have to,
not having
if we have to plan it
associated with trauma.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, she made a note about that just for like note purposes, because that would have put me a week overdue. And there was a doctor that I didn't particularly get along with super well. Like it seemed like we were always passing each other. I'm sure she's super professional, but our personalities didn't go well together. I was at work and I got a notification on my Google Calendar that I had an appointment at noon. And I'm like, why? I don't have an appointment today. I didn't schedule this. What is going on? And it said induction appointment. I'm like, what the heck? I didn't plan this. I didn't sign off on this. And so I called the OB office and I'm like, what is this appointment? Because I'm not planning to show up for it. I'm at work. And they're like, yeah, you have an induction. I'm like, well, I'm not going to it. It took a long time to get that thing canceled. There was so many like, okay, we'll talk to this person, talk to this person, no, talk to that other person. And it was this whole runaround. And so finally it all got canceled. And we talked about what we will do once we hit closer to 42 weeks. What are we going to put in place to make sure that you do have this baby at 42 weeks or before? And then I finally had it all canceled. And my doctor called me. And I'm like, oh, shoot, now I'm in trouble. And she said, you are never obligated to show up for an induction if you did not want one.
Yeah.
And she said, you do not need to be induced. She says, obviously, if you go to 42 weeks, I think that you should be. And I think it would be good to put an induction on the schedule just because that way you're there and you don't have to take away somebody else's appointment if you have to be emergency induced. I said, okay, we can schedule one for the 31st, which would put me at 42 weeks. So we scheduled an induction for that day. And if I hit that point, then I would hit that point. But I was going to do everything in my power to not make it to 42 weeks. But like my doctor empowered me in that decision where she's like, you don't need to, but we should probably put something on the schedule. And then if you don't make that appointment, somebody else gets it and somebody else is happy because they get their appointment sooner than they thought.
How many weeks did they put you down for that original
38, I think, or it was maybe, I don't even, it's awful. I forget at what time my baby was born. So
that's funny. It's just interesting because it just shows the what I call the patriarchal culture of obstetrics. So it's like, you're gonna do this. Like, how is it that you would schedule a procedure for a grown person, an adult with autonomy, and not tell them and not have them agree to it? Just, you will come do this. That's insanity, especially if your doctor had already said there's no medical reason for it. And I can't comment because A, I'm not a doctor. B, I wasn't there for your entire pregnancy and I haven't read your medical file. But if your doctor is okay, if everything looks good and your doctor is okay with you waiting, then why would somebody go in behind your doctor's back and just automatically schedule something?
So fun fact, I told my doctor
that.
when she called me, I said, well, I really hope you're on call when I go in labor. Like, it really established that I really wanted her to be the doctor attending my birth. So fun fact, she did attend my birth, but she was not on call. The doctor on call was the one who had scheduled my induction.
Oh my God.
So it would have probably not gone over great if she had been the one attending my birth. Yeah. So now I do understand all the people who talk about, like you can fire a doctor and all of those things, which sounds severe. I kind of get that there's a place for that.
There is, because if they're taking away your autonomy, then they shouldn't be your doctor.
And for some people, that's going to make them feel safe. For me, it was just like, I don't feel safe with you.
Yeah. And that's totally reasonable. So I'm assuming you went into labor.
I did. Yeah. So I worked full time right up until 41 weeks and 2 days. And then I decided, you know what? I'm tired of people asking me why I'm still at work. It happened like every day, multiple times in a day. I worked at a fairly big organization, so there was a lot of people. It's crazy how many people think that they're allowed to talk to pregnant women disrespectfully or ask them personal questions. That's none of their business. But anyways, they were like, oh, you're still at work? Why are you still here? I'm like, because I don't know when this baby is going to be.
And also I need money. Somebody's got to pay the bill.
And you guys are covering my insurance, so I kind of got to stick around. I had coworkers who were like, you are so dumb for wanting a natural birth. You're so naive. C-section is the way to go. And I'm like, okay, blocking you out because I don't want people cutting my stomach unless if I absolutely need to have it done. So I was also determined to be unmedicated. And they're like, you are so out of your mind. You want an epidural. Every mom wants an epidural. They're like, you don't know how bad it's going to hurt. I said, of course I don't know. That's why I'm practicing breathing. And somebody's like, you're going to forget all of that breathing that you ever practiced. I'm like, that's why I'm practicing at work when I'm stressed out. I practice breathing around the clock pretty much because work was so stressful. I'm like, okay, here's a prime example to learn to relax my body in the midst of stress. So we are breathing. And I was listening to hypnobirthing tracks around the clock, just practicing, just relaxing my body. That's what I did at work all the time. And then the evenings, we did perineal stretches almost every night just to help with hopefully avoiding tearing. And so I also practiced breathing through that because it was so uncomfortable. And I'm like, if you tell me I'm going to forget how to breathe, I'm going to be super intentional to make it second nature. And in one of my conversations with my doctor about induction versus not induction, she said, just so you know, if you don't schedule an induction, you cannot have an epidural because you're on blood thinners.
Oh, because you have to be off of the blood thinners for 12 hours.
She said, I know you want a natural birth. I am just telling you that this is going to force you into not even having an option. And that was sort of terrifying. But at the same time, it was just like, I just know that I am going to have to trust my body this whole entire process because there is no out. And if my doctor says you have to have a C-section, it's actually going to be an emergency. And I am going to say, yes, ma'am. And we are going to do this thing.
Yeah. And if it hadn't been 12, what was it, 12 hours that you had to be off the blood thinners?
Yes. Yeah.
So if it hadn't been 12 hours, then you would have to have general anesthesia.
Yep. And she prepared me for that. She said, this is what's going to happen if something goes wrong. She says, we're going to avoid it as much as we can. And we're going to do whatever we can to make it not happen. But I want you to know that if you don't get induced, then you can't have an epidural. And I'm like, okay, this is what I have been preparing for this whole entire time. So I'm a good fit for it. This is what I wanted. And it sort of was empowering, quite honestly, because I had worked so hard to prepare my mind space for doing it unmedicated. Also, like my mom had 10 kids, okay? I'm her second one. I was born by cesarean. Everybody else was a VBAC. So she's pretty much a superwoman and she was never medicated. So that was normal for me. Until I was 25, I didn't really know that medicated birth was a thing. I'm so naive. But I was like, what's the excitement around medication? People have been doing this for thousands of years. All the animals do it and they're so relaxed. I mean, that's where I watched birth a lot. I grew up on a farm and that's just what they did.
Yeah.
And maybe it sounds like naive and dumb, but I tried to just lean into my body and what I was created for.
Mm-hmm. So then when did you go into labor? Do you remember?
I went into labor at 41 weeks and 3 days. So like the day after I was done my job. I was so bummed. I was like looking forward to being at home and just loving pregnancy because I loved being pregnant. I hated the needles, but 40 weeks came around and I'm like, pregnancy is so fun. I could do this for another several months. Like, this is so awesome. I was huge. I gained like 60 pounds, but I loved it. I loved being pregnant. It was so fun to just be me and the baby. And everywhere we went together, which of course, sometimes I'm like, man, I just want to be my own person. But like overall, it was the best thing in my life. I loved it. My husband and I, we went shopping at Menards. We walked through Menards for hours and hours. And I don't know how I made such good decisions when I was there. Like, I told him what kind of shower we were going to put in a bathroom. I told him what kind of sink we were going to put in a bathroom because we were doing a bathroom renovation. And we did all of the things. I felt great. I had energy. And I didn't have any brain fatigue. I didn't have any Braxton Hicks. Like, all was well. We got home. I folded laundry, hung out with the puppy. And I started getting contractions. And I'm like, this is actually happening. My husband was outside. I went over. I'm like, hey, just so you know. And then I had to stop for a contraction. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, put up my finger to like, just wait a minute. I'm like, I'm having contractions. And he's like, oh, how far apart are they? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't timed them yet, but they're pretty real. And they were just so close together. I'm like, holy cow, like this is happening. So we called the doula and I'm like, yeah, so it's been going on for about half an hour. She's like, okay, yeah, it does sound like the real thing. How about you go take a shower and just lay down on your side in bed and just relax, get some rest if you can. I showered, which was great. I was starving hungry. And so my husband made me a sandwich and I could not eat it. And I cried because I couldn't eat my sandwich. Mm-hmm. I didn't cry because of the contractions, although they were uncomfortable. I cried because I was hungry. And I'm like, I'm going to go to the hospital starving hungry. And then they're not going to let me eat because that was the one thing I had never talked about with anybody. It was like, I want to eat when I'm in labor, if at all possible, right? Because I don't know how long this is going to go. I want to keep up my strength. And so I was determined to eat before I went to the hospital, but I couldn't get it down. Mm-hmm. So all was well. It's crazy how much superpower you have when you go into the process of labor.
So then how could you tell the difference between Braxton Hicks and real contractions?
That's a good question. You know, as a first timer, I sometimes discredit myself, but also I talk to my old sister sometimes about Braxton Hicks contractions. And she said, you know, first time moms, they never have Braxton Hicks. And I'm like, I'm calling bullshit because I'm having Braxton Hicks and there is nothing wrong with the position of my baby. Because she was like, well, then there's something wrong with the position of your baby. I'm like, well, I have ultrasounds every month and at the end, like every week. And I'm like, there is nothing wrong. And I just think that I don't know, this is not the answer anybody wants. When you're in tune with your body, you just know. Mm-hmm. I know, like the most cliche.
It just feels different. So what we usually describe is that instead of just like the tightening down in the sides of the uterus, you start to feel the top of the uterus pushing down. And I honestly don't remember. I can't describe it either, what the difference is between the Braxton Hicks and the regular contractions. I just know that it's like a full body experience when you're having regular contractions versus the Braxton Hicks.
Yeah, it's a totally different experience. Like I had Braxton Hicks like around 37 weeks. And I'm like, man, I hope this is the real thing. But it wasn't, because so at 37 weeks, I kind of wanted baby to come. But then 40 weeks, I'm like, this is so awesome. Let's stay pregnant forever. This is fun, which is so weird. But
I was very much the opposite.
I don't think that I make a majority. And I just don't. I just knew in my gut that this was a real contraction. I just knew it because it came out of nowhere. And then they kept on happening and I had to breathe through them And it would catch my breath if I was talking. Like I would have to, like I stopped, like I had to stop. I couldn't talk through them. And I know some women are like super women and they talk through all their contractions. And people are like, yeah, you're not going to have that baby for like another several hours. Just relax, take a nap. And then they have it 2 minutes later. Like I know
that's a unicorn.
Like I know
Doesn't
that those
happen very
things happen, but that did not happen to me. That was not my story. We went to the hospital. Well, I think contractions started around 4. And we went to the hospital shortly after 6.
And then what time did you deliver? Do you remember?
The next day at 9:30 in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
I went way too soon, but like I was so uncomfortable. Now my baby was really, really low for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks. Like he was down there. And ultrasound techs were like, I don't know how he's still inside of you. I wonder if they had burst my water, if he would have been delivered sooner. But like my water just didn't break. And I was very uncomfortable. And so I just wanted to go to the hospital just so that I would be in the place that I was going to be giving birth.
Did your doula come right away?
She did. She had like an hour drive, but she canceled her evening plans and she came out and she was glad to cancel her evening plans because she's an introvert. And so she was glad that she didn't have to go. And she was with me the whole entire time at the hospital. So I thought I would labor at home. And then once things were like really progressing, then I would go to the hospital. Like that was what I envisioned. I actually never came up with a birth plan. I don't envision that I ever will if I have more because it's not going to go the way you planned.
Exactly. You have an idea of what you want and what you can negotiate, but you're never going to be able to just be like, oh, I don't want that if that's the only option. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got to be flexible.
My doula was like, do you want to labor in a tub? No, I hate water on my face. If I take a bath and I get like a drop of water on my face, I'm like, this has to go now or I'm out.
Yeah.
Like I just hate water on my face. So like we had those conversations and I did try the shower for a little while. I hated it.
Yeah, if you don't like water, it's not going to be very relaxing.
Yeah. I mean, water is relaxing for me. I just hate it on my face.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, also with being monitored all the time, it just made it like not relaxing to be in the shower. The toilet,
that opens your pelvis.
It was torture. I hated it.
Everything really low.
Yeah, like it was hard for me. And I also hated the peanut ball. Yeah, it looks like it should be the most comfortable thing in the world. But oh man, I did flip my doula off a few times.
That's funny. So what positions did you like?
None of them.
None of them because you're uncomfortable.
Yeah, laying on my side without the peanut ball was okay. Actually, I think I liked when I was like facing the bed, like when the bed was like in a sitting position and I could put my arms up on the top because then I could kind of hang down. I never asked my doula about it, but she never really let me be in that position a lot. But I also ended up having a little tiny bit of a cervical lip, I think. And so they really needed to do positions that would help. And so the peanut ball. Yeah, the peanut ball.
Sometimes that hanging position is harder to monitor too.
Yeah, it would always, I think it shifted the thing on my belly. And then it would, go off and then there would have to be people who would check it and all of that crap. So yeah, I spent a lot of time on the toilet. I had to really, really work on breathing through that. Actually, something I loved. I don't remember what it's called. So my doula taught us spinning babies. And she did some of the spinning babies exercises with me. I absolutely loved when she and the nurse helped to get my backside into what's that thing called? Like it's like a hammock, but it's like a rebozo or something.
Yeah, it's rebozo.
Yeah, they lifted me up in that, and they said, when you have a contraction, just shake your booty. I'm like, how the heck am I going to do that? Here I am, like 230 pounds or whatever I was at that time, about that, and I am hugely pregnant, and I'm going to have a contraction, and you want me to lift my butt off of this bed and then shake it. Okay, but it was amazing. It was like the best thing in the world. I could have done that probably the whole entire time. Well, I couldn't have.
Yeah. Were you like were you sitting or were you on your back when you did that?
I lifted myself up on my feet in my hands and they held. And of course, then they gave a little bit of support in the midsection with holding it up in the butt. But literally,
did you have a push bar or something to hang on to, or you just stood up? Oh, wow.
I braced myself on my hands and my feet.
Okay.
I maybe held onto the bed on the sides. My husband was sleeping at the time, so he didn't help at all. I wasn't even jealous of him. I'm like this saint, I guess.
Probably. My husband just got in the way, so I didn't care. I was like, I got my girls to take care of me.
Yeah, my nurse had never heard of doing that, actually. She didn't know anything about spinning babies. And my doula was like, hey, can I teach you how to do something? She's like, yeah, anything, whatever helps. And so she had papers on what she wanted to do. Mm-hmm. The nurse went and like studied the papers a bit. And when she had an idea of what was going on, she was like my doula's second doula pretty much. And I mean, she was amazing. She helped with that position and I loved it. It was so relaxing on my body somehow. And then when I was laboring on the toilet, she gave me a back massage.
That's so nice.
So I had a really positive experience. Now, the craziest thing that calmed me was massaging my doula's arm.
Massaging your doula's arm. Like you were massaging her arm?
Yeah.
Because you were focusing on something else to do.
Yep.
It's like a stress ball.
Yeah. She says, well, this is different, but I like this.
That's funny.
It really helped me to think outside of myself. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like when you're massaging, you don't want to like beat somebody up, right? You got to be gentle.
Right.
And so it helped me to just have like a gentle energy in my body, relaxing and just, so yeah, that was one of the best things. I did start kind of spinning out of control sometime in the night. And I was like, I think we should do a C-section. I was so.
But were you close to delivery at that time?
No. I dilated so freaking slow. So when I got to the hospital, I was not even 3 centimeters dilated. But because I was 41 and 3, they're like, you can
because you have this history. Yeah.
They're like, you're in labor. You can be here. At 6 o'clock in the morning when my doctor checked on me, I was still only 7 centimeters. Mm-hmm. And that was 12 hours of labor or like 14 almost.
By then you could have gotten an epidural.
Yeah. I could have, but I don't. The anesthesiologist, so my doula, bless her, even though she knew that the answer was no, she went and asked if I could have medication because I was so sure that I needed it. My husband was sleeping, and that's a key point because after he woke up, I completely calmed down and regained that power. I can do this. I'll be fine.
That's that rush of oxytocin and that feeling of safety.
Yeah. Like
it increases your cortisol levels and pushes you through labor.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like I wasn't upset that he was sleeping. Like I was fine with it. I was glad he was sleeping, so he could get some rest because, I couldn't. And I had so much support with my doula and with the nurse that was assigned to my room. And so I'm like, I'm fine. But then I started to not be fine. And so they gave me whatever that gas is.
Nitrous oxide.
Yeah, it didn't work. It was like, I don't know what this stuff is, but it sure doesn't help. It actually made it worse because I had to focus on breathing it in. And it was awful. And they're like, I don't think this thing is working because it's supposed to make you happy. I'm like,
that's the thing about nitrous oxide. The machines are hard to use. It's hard to figure out if it's working or not. And then in addition, when it is working, it doesn't help everybody.
It did not make me any difference. It made me more stressed out. So I was like, I told my doula, I'm like, you have to hold this. And she's like, I'm not allowed to. I said, well, I am not doing this. I was so mad. I'm like, again, it's not working. And I really like that. I really started to forget to focus on breathing. I started to make more higher pitch sounds instead of like low pitch and whatever. Like women in labor are just weird. Like they do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to not have a stress response when you're in that much pain.
Yeah.
You have to really focus to not have that stress response.
And when my husband finally came around, because I think he woke up because he started to notice things weren't as great as they were. Something I don't know what woke up.
You were in active labor. If you're at 7 centimeters, that's when things get real.
Yeah. He came and he just, I don't know, like he probably held my hand or he just touched my arm. I don't know what he did. He said, babe, just breathe. Just breathe. And I felt my body just finally relax again. And I never thought about needing pain medications again. So he was a really awesome support person. And when my doctor came at like 6 and I wasn't, more than 7 centimeters dilated, I was just so uncomfortable and my water hadn't broken. And my doctor, my doula discussed it. And my doula was like, I really think it would be good to break her water. And my doctor, I remember this conversation because it was interesting and I was still with it, because I wasn't drugged. I was totally with it still. And my doctor looked at her and she said, I have never heard a doula recommend breaking water. And my doula was like, well, I believe in getting things done.
Right.
And I said, is it going to help me have less pressure? And they said, yes, but then it will also intensify. And I said, well, I just want the pressure gone. So could you?
When your baby's out, the pressure's gone.
Yeah. But I had so much pressure and it was so uncomfortable. And sometimes I felt like I needed to push, but obviously I couldn't push yet. It was too soon. And the pressure was just worse than a contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And so they broke my water, and much to my disappointment, there was no big sploosh of water. There was no big anything. It was just a trickle.
Mm-hmm. Probably your baby's head was.
Yeah, he was
holding it
down
all in
there.
at that point.
I wanted drama because I like drama.
Yeah.
But the pressure left, and it was a relief. Like, obviously, labor picked up intensity incredibly. But I finally felt that loss of the pressure, and I felt like I could focus on breathing through contractions again instead of just that pushing. Interestingly enough, like, they tried to get me to go to the bathroom before the baby was born, and I had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm like,
the baby's head so low, it's probably blocking everything.
They were like, you have to pee. You have to pee. And I sat there and I'm like, I cannot pee.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been drinking.
It's really hard.
Yeah, I had been drinking water. I had been eating Jell-O. So there should have been a lot of fluids, but I'm like, I cannot pee.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, you have to pee. You have to poop. You got to get that all out. And I'm like, I cannot. And I thought, it's normal to be able to. And so I felt like maybe there was something wrong with me. But at the same time, I was at the point of being just like very easily irritated. I'm like, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
So let me get back to something a little more comfortable. And you know what? If I shit the bed, I shit the bed. Who cares?
Yeah. No one cares.
I didn't, but that was a good time.
So how was pushing?
It was so fun.
Yeah, because you're like, you feel better when you're pushing into the pain, right?
Yeah.
How long did you push?
Well, my husband and I don't agree on this.
Okay.
I think it was 40 minutes and he thinks it's 20.
It feels a lot longer when you're the one doing the pushing.
Yeah. And I know that my doula has extensive notes and I should have maybe asked her for them before this.
Somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. Maybe we could say 30 for the sake of this podcast.
It was for a period of time and it wasn't over an hour.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
It was hard. It was very hard. There was a time where I told my doctor, I said, you can just pull it out, can't you?
I think everybody says that. It's like, no, babe, you got to work at this.
And she says, we can, but I don't think we will. But she did get the nurses to bring the needed supplies if that were to happen. But I think it was more just for my peace of mind to see that, she's like, we can. I'll be prepared if you need me to. But you don't need to. There was at least one time where I was pushing when I shouldn't have been. And she said, you have to stop pushing right now. And so I listened. And then at some point I was just like, okay, listen, everything feels the same right now. You have to tell me when to push because I don't know anymore, which I am so thankful. Like I had the cohesion to communicate that in the middle of the intensity of pushing and whatever, just to say in between a contraction, I don't know the difference anymore. You tell me when to go and I'm gonna go. It was so fun. Just before pushing started, like all the nurses came in and they prepared the whole room. And honestly, it felt like there was going to be a party.
Yeah.
It really felt like there was going to be a party. Like a surprise party. Everybody was so quiet. Everything was so peaceful. It did not disrupt my calm space at all. Like sometimes people talk about how that disrupts everything. It was not disruptive at all. It was like so peaceful. And I learned later on that all the nurses were jealous of the nurses assigned to my room because it was so quiet in my room.
That says a lot.
So I wonder if I don't know if that played into how their presence came into my room where they were just like, this is a calm space and they're able to maintain that. I don't know, but it did not disrupt me at all. Like it did not distract me. Like I watched and I'm like, this is so awesome. Here it goes. So it was hard, but I loved it. I was able to feel every part of my baby just slip out and it was so cool. So I didn't want to watch. They were like, you can watch, like, here's a mirror. We can drop it down. I'm like, I am not looking at this. But I will feel it. And it was just so amazing to just feel everything, to feel like the shoulders and the legs just slip out. I always told my husband, and this is what we envisioned for birth was that the baby is just going to slip out. That's what we said. The baby's just going to slip out. And obviously you push the baby out, but in some ways they do just slip out.
Yeah. Once you get past that hard part.
Yeah. I didn't feel the ring of fire.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So some of my breathing practices, I remember one time very specifically thinking, I don't want to feel that ring of fire because people talk about how awful it is. And that was just one of my goals was to not feel that. I don't remember it.
Yeah.
Obviously it happened because it's just part of the process, but I didn't feel it.
And then do you remember if you had like a tear that they needed to repair or anything?
So I had the teeniest, tiniest little tear that I never felt. And my doctor's like, you do not need stitches. It's just going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to have to heal from the stitches.
Did you like get to hold your baby right away? What was all that?
Yeah, I got to hold him right away. We don't have any pictures that are worthy to be shared because I was living in the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we don't have any of those cute family pictures. That's the only disappointment I have. But yes, I got to hold him right away. Everything was fine. The placenta delivered very quickly. They didn't even give me a lot of Pitocin because I remember my doula saying, I think you can cut the Pitocin. The hospital had like a whole smorgasbord of oils. And so during pushing, they kept me very oiled up. So that probably helped with not tearing. It was just such a cool experience.
Awesome. And then how was your recovery? Like, how was postpartum for you?
So I had to spend 2 nights in the hospital because baby's oxygen levels were inconsistent. And the reason why they had to monitor it was because he was a week and a half overdue. If he had been on his due date or before, they wouldn't have cared. But since he was a little bit over, they had to keep him. You don't get a lot of rest there.
Yeah, that is a true statement.
Also, he had to be on the bilirubin. He hated it.
But like on the lights or on when he was getting stuck?
On the lights, just being...
Okay.
Yeah, because then we weren't really allowed to hold him. He latched very quickly the first latch. It was easy to breastfeed him. So I was breastfeeding. But then with like the stress of him needing to have the blue light and all of those things, it really started to affect me. And so we actually had a hard time latching. So we finally decided to supplement a little bit with a donated milk.
Oh, they have that. That's amazing. So you got donor milk, and then were you pumping during that time?
Yeah, attempting to. Like nothing came out, but yes, the process of just keeping my breast activated and all of the things. There was but they couldn't release him until his jaundice levels came down, and they couldn't release him until his oxygen levels were good. And obviously he needed to eat all of those things. And I'm like, this is why I wanted a home birth, because I mean, I respect that some of that stuff had to happen, but with the intensity of like 2 nurses assigned to each of us, and then the lactation consultant, and then the other person, and the other person. It was just like overwhelming. Like you could not catch a break. With the bottle feeding, he didn't want to take it, and he still has like this hate for bottles. And so we were trying to give him a bottle, and he was just fighting it and fighting and fighting it. And then a nurse came in, and she says, well, I'll show you how to do it. And she just tipped that thing up, and he had it chugged in like 30 seconds. And I was just like, I hate you. I'm like, you can't eat that fast. That's not how fast he would get from my breast. And now you just...
Right.
He got it so fast that he doesn't even know if he's full. And so the next time
that's not exactly paced bottle feeding.
No, I was just like, this is a newborn. Like, he's a day old. He's not 1. Yeah. Anyways, that was hard. So the next time he gave cues for being hungry, I just like nursed him right away. So I put him on the breast, and he just latched, and he was like in heaven. And then one of the nurses found out, and she's like, you're not allowed to do that until we've checked his oxygen levels. And I'm like, but he was crying and he was hungry.
Was he being monitored? They weren't monitoring his oxygen levels consistently, or was he in your room?
He was in my room.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, it was a ride. So that was hard. And when we got home, all was well. I didn't really deal with postpartum anxiety or depression. At least I never really was like diagnosed, and I never really felt it. However, I definitely look back on that period, and I know like I was more easily frustrated. But I also only had 12 weeks of maternity leave, and then I was going back to a very stressful job. That was always on the back of my mind. And so every day, every minute with my baby felt. And so when other people wanted to come over and see us or be with my baby, felt like it was taking away from my time with him, because I was already going to lose so much time with him once I went back to work. So that was definitely a struggle, some days more than others. And I didn't always handle it the best.
Well, we do what we can.
Yeah.
Did you end up going back to work?
I did, for 9 weeks.
And then what happened?
I just stayed at home. And that was what I wanted to do. So like the reason I went back to work was because if I didn't go back to work, then I was disqualified for insurance.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely had to keep my insurance. I also initially in the beginning of pregnancy thought I would be like the career mom who worked, a 40-hour job and all the things. Like I just thought that's who I was. But pregnancy really changed that for me, where I started to having that bond. And I'm like, I didn't grow a baby for 9 months to leave that baby at the daycare.
Yeah.
With no disrespect for the mom who does, right? But for me, I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We all have to decide how our life is going to change after we have kids. And some people, if that's their passion and they want that for their career, that's great. If not, you learn pretty quickly what you're going to need to do.
Yeah. So I got home, and just like a few days or like a week afterwards, he cut his first tooth. And I was just so thankful that I was at home for that. And even though my job ended a lot more abruptly than I had anticipated it ending, and I had to work through a lot about that, I was just so grateful that I was at home when his first tooth came out, instead of having my nanny tell him, oh yeah, by the way, he's teething and his tooth just came out.
And you've managed to pivot your career to doing your health and wellness stuff from home and coaching.
Yeah.
And all that.
So I had been into health and wellness for a few years before I went into like a corporate kind of a job. And I was attracted to a corporate work environment. I thought, I want to try it. I want to do this. Maybe I can do both. I had been fairly successful in the health and wellness world before. And I just thought, but I want to experience the 9 to 5. Because I always saw myself as being that person. And then while I was pregnant, I'm like, no, this is not really what I want to do with my life. And I really want to get back into being more into like sharing health and wellness with other moms specifically, because what it did for me before I started sharing was I didn't need to take naps anymore. And I started growing a vision for actually being an energetic mom, and hopefully someday an energetic grandma. And me before being into health and wellness couldn't have done that. Like I was in such poor health.
Well, and the PCOS probably wasn't helping.
Yeah.
Getting those hormones balanced is pretty important.
Yeah. I mean, being able to get pregnant with a PCOS diagnosis is just amazing in itself.
Yeah. Naturally get pregnant. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was a bit of a transition, honestly, because so I had done it before, like I said, and then getting back into it, like the whole market changed. Like I was coming back to a completely different world. I still had a support group of people that I could jump back into. I wasn't by myself. Like I had a team of people to just jump back in with, but things were different with them. The community had changed a little bit because I had been out of it for like 2 years. And there was a lot of mind stuff that I had to work through. And so when I had the opportunity to become certified as a life and mindset coach, I'm like, obviously I'm doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I need it. People have always said, like, you're really good at listening. I love talking to you. And I'm like, I better get some tools so that I can actually listen well. And if I want to lead a successful team in health and wellness, then what better tools to have but the ability to actually sit with people and coach them through whatever mind drama they're going through.
Yeah.
How do I balance it all? I'm still figuring it out.
Aren't we all?
Sometimes my baby goes to babysitters. He doesn't really do well being away from me. And so that's always a bit of a stretch. And I want to do more than just like fit it into the cracks, because you can't really grow very successfully if you're only trying to put it in cracks, because you might fill that crack with like watching reels.
Yeah. I think we're all guilty of that.
I am so guilty of it. But I have to say this though, with being health and wellness minded, also like leaning into being in tune with your body, something I'm really starting to notice now with having a regular cycle. For the record, I have regular cycle. Yes. Like it's so predictable, is recognizing that there are times in my cycle where I'm a lot more creative. And then there are times in my cycle where I just really don't get a lot done. And to lean into what my strengths are during my cycle. And I'm just recently trying to like lean into that and work my business according to how my cycle is. Not that I ever neglect it exactly, but that I will work it differently based on how my cycle is.
Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
That has been so empowering to just be like, okay, so this is going on in my cycle. That's why you're feeling this way. What is your strength right now? During my period, I'm very, very able to focus instead of being distracted. I'm very quiet and more into whatever I decide to be in on. I'm just totally zeroed in on it. And then at a different part of my cycle, like I have so much creative energy and so much excitement and so much enthusiasm. Like I could probably work out 3 times a day and not feel exhausted. And so just like working my business with the rhythms of my body.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Tricia, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
Honestly, it looks a lot different than I thought it would look, but I think we basically covered most of the things. I didn't talk about how big my baby was, which blows some people away. He was 8 pounds, 13 ounces.
Oh, wow. Natural delivery.
And I thought it was a good sized baby. Like I didn't really think of him as big or like.
I mean, but you were 41 weeks and 3 days. So they keep getting bigger.
Yeah.
They don't shrink.
No, they don't. Yeah. And like I only had like the tiniest of tears. And it just is that reminder that when you lean into your body's strengths and you just trust your body and you have a birth support team that knows what you want. Like my doctor knew I didn't want to be medicated. My doctor knew that I wanted natural, and she knew that I was practicing hypnobirthing.
And she knew how to help you.
Yes. And she
That's
was
key.
just like there for me in it all. And she like held the space for me when I needed space. And she pushed me when I needed to be like pushed and said, no, like you can't relax right now.
That's awesome.
And a tiny little tear. I also think it really helped to be like stretching. What is that word again?
The perineal stretch.
Oh, the perennials. The perennial stretching. Yeah. I think like just the combination of some of those things really helped me to be able to deliver that chunk of a baby without needing stitches. And also, I have to say this because you're a nurse, so I'm allowed to. My first poop was like the best poop of my life.
Isn't it though? If you don't, if you're not pushing, it's pretty great.
Yeah. I went to the bathroom and I came out. I'm like, that was awesome.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I had like heard all the bad stories about it. I'm like, oh, it's going to be awful. And it wasn't.
Good. Were your nurses high-fiving you? Because like we think that's pretty great.
Well, there was no nurse present. I think there was a nurse came in to check on Harrison, like my baby at the time, but she didn't do anything. I'm like, isn't this
She's probably the nursery nurse. It probably wasn't the postpartum nurse.
I don't think
the postpartum nurse would have been pretty impressed.
Yeah, I was like, where's the nurse to celebrate my poop? Because it was super awesome. I shouldn't have flushed it. Everybody should have seen it. Like it was so like, man, I thought it was going to be awful.
That's awesome. I'm so happy that you had a great poop after you delivered. I'll high five you. Here you go.
Thank you.
Well, Tricia, if that's it, if there's nothing else that you feel like we missed or anything, then I want to just say thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so glad that we got to do this and can't wait to hear about your next baby, but no rush.
Yeah, we're not rushing that one. I mean, there's a lot of people telling us we need to have a girl because we have a boy, and they're like, you need to have your girl. And I'm like, can't plan that.
Well, I look forward to continuing to watch your journey, and I'm so glad that we got to connect this way.
Yes, I'm so glad we met, Kelly.
Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to share the podcast with a friend who can benefit from the valuable insights that we share here. And if you could take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me. If you're ready to work one-on-one with me to embark on a transformational journey towards a confident and empowered hospital birth experience, go to kellyhoff.com/empowered and enroll in my Empowered Hospital Birth Coaching Program. Together, we'll create a roadmap to a birth experience that you'll cherish forever. That's KELLYHOF.com/empowered. Let's make your birth experience extraordinary.